Shamaan, the long sentencing from Justice Hilliard there, over an hour, laying out in quite some detail how he managed to reach that sentence of 9 years in custody.
Yes, there was lots of detail to go through there, wasn't there? The judge spoke about how he had received evidence from 3 separate psychiatrists and heard evidence over multiple hours. There was a lot for the judge to consider. On the one hand, there were some psychiatrists that had suggested that Chail was experiencing severe depression. He could have potentially been on the autism spectrum and was also dealing with psychosis. But on the other hand, we heard from other psychiatrists who had seemingly disputed some of this. One of them had suggested that Chail was instead socially isolated. He was suffering from a lack of purpose and a lack of intimacy, as well as anger as well, and had suggested that whilst he was experiencing mild depressive symptoms, he had suggested that Chail had instead found a new purpose, seeking attention by assassinating the Queen. So there was a lot there for the judge to have to take into consideration. In the end, in his conclusions, the judge said of Chail that there are clear concerns about his mental state, whatever his diagnosis at different times. He's referencing there the fact that Chail had seemingly planned out some form of an attack, or thought about planning out an attack from childhood. So there was some dispute about when his mental health issues had begun. The judge continued saying he found the defendant was culpable to a significant degree when he applied to join the Ministry of Defence earlier that year. So that was earlier in 2021. He seemed to think he had applied for this role in the Ministry of Defence because he wanted to get close to the royal family. He said his idea in 2021 to kill the Queen, to buy equipment and to undertake research also came before he became mentally unwell. He added that by the time he broke into Windsor Castle, of course, that was on Christmas Day back in 2021, he had lost touch with reality and had become psychotic. For this reason, the judge said that a hospital order may not be the best way to deal with his case, and that it must be dealt with under what's called a hybrid act, so under the section 45A of the Mental Health Act. What this means is that he will remain at Broadmoor, where he has been for quite some time now, will only be transferred to custody when he has received the treatment that he needs. And the treatment that was suggested was around 18 months worth of treatment. Now, this case dates back, as I said, to December 2021. It was on Christmas morning when the Queen had been at Windsor Castle when Chail had tried to enter the grounds of Windsor Castle armed with a loaded crossbow and wearing a Star Wars inspired mask. Now, at the time, there were lots of questions being asked about how he was able to enter the grounds of Windsor Castle, and we have heard Sky News spoke earlier to a spokesperson who represented counter-terrorism who did admit that lessons do need to be learned.
As he said to the officers when they stopped him in the grounds of Windsor Castle, that his intention was to kill the Queen. He was a dangerous individual, armed with a crossbow that was loaded. And it's only as a result of the Royalty and Specialist Protection Officers on duty on the day who dealt with this so calmly and professionally that he was stopped and nobody was hurt. They saw him, walked towards him, challenged him, and they gave him some clear instructions, and he then dropped the crossbow, and then those officers were able to calmly arrest him, and then obviously officers of the Counter-Terrorism Command then took over the investigation at that point. I think the important thing to remember here is that nobody was hurt in this incident. The royal family were protected. The Windsor Castle was protected by Royalty and Specialist Protection Officers who were there on the day. And I think that's the important thing to remember here. We will, of course, learn our lessons from every incident that happens.
So that was the head of the counter-terrorism command there, expressing how scary it must have been for his officers and praising them for their response. And as I say, Chail has now been sentenced to 9 years in prison, but it's under a hybrid order, which means he will receive mental health treatment before being transferred to custody.
Shamaan Freeman-Powell at the Old Bailey, thank you.